Good morning and welcome back to the Think In podcast. Today we have with us Dr. Vibhuti Sachdev, the Dean of Geetham School of Architecture. Good morning, ma'am, and welcome.
Good morning, Likni.
Without wasting much time, let's get straight to the point and discussing about urban planning. So, ma'am, how do you think can we create an ecosystem when builders or architects and citizens are on the same page for ensuring sustainable urban development goals?
Okay, it's a good question because in the question lies the answer. If you want to be on the same page, then you have to know each other's professions and what they do. So the planners and the architects and the builders and the citizens have to know what they do in order to team up for a ecosystem that works for everyone. So and there is so much in common with everybody. I mean, the developers and the planners and the architects, they need to kind of just appreciate what they do.
You are very much right, because how do citizens know about the new developments that are coming in can only be I think the architectures can only enlighten them in the space.
Well, I don't think so. I mean, you see, the planners have a very crucial role to play in development because they sort of figure out how the city is going to develop, what functions are going to, which area is going to be commercial and residential and all of that. And architects take on from that vision. So, our planners have a very crucial. I think what could bridge both of them is an appreciation of physical planning. So that if the planning is done in 3 dimensions, then you see, massing and volumes and all of that. And although it's laid out in bylaws, but very few planners do their planning in 3 dimensions. So I think that, and also I think, for example, all the municipal corporations and the district authorities ought to include architects as well, so that there is a more kind of collaborative team effort towards development, and they don't end up working in silos, which is largely what is happening at the moment, and which is what the problem is.
Right. While we see a good trend of students and young individuals moving into urban planning, what, according to you, are changes that are needed in the education realm of urban planning to address the sustainability and the climate challenges?
I think what we desire in profession should be reflected in education. Only then the whole cycle will get completed. So in education as well, there has to be more bridging, more multidisciplinary, more interdisciplinary sort of opportunities for architects to engage with planning students and for planning students to engage with architecture students, and in that way they would actually learn to work together when they graduate and become professionals. And I think that has to start very early on, which will then have a positive effect on
Correct.
the profession.
True. While we see technology taking over a lot of things, how do you think the intersection between technology and building or creating a smart and a sustainable city the landscape would look like, and the possible challenges in this space?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is a very good question, and it's a very pressing question because it has to begin from asking, whose smartness are we talking about? It's smart for whom? And what exactly does smart mean? And also equally for sustainability. I mean, it's sustainable for whom? And what is that parameter of sustainability? Is it only economic? Is it well-being? Is it happiness index? So what are the parameters of sustainability are we looking at, and how do we actually translate them into practical solutions is I think for a long time what we've not done in our country is to actually look at ourselves, and we've been chasing other goals which are outside of our context and culture. And I think it is high time we looked at ourselves as cultural and contextual entities to be able to frame truly what fits in our landscape and what fits for us, rather than, always chasing some other dream. We have to create our own dreams, and that is what is, I think, has been problematic for so long, for obvious reasons. But now is the time perhaps when, younger generation like yours can afford to say, hang on a minute, actually this doesn't work for me. If it works for other countries, fine, but it doesn't work for me. So there has to be kind of some confidence in and I think that is already happening in our country, some confidence in being able to resist assumptions, resist, sort of big sweep solutions and say, it doesn't work for us.
Right. While we talk about what works for our country and unlike the other countries, what do you think can Indian cities learn from global leaders like Singapore and London, who have been quite successful in building their cities sustainable, aligning themselves with the urban development goals?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are ESG goals. So I think there are always things to learn from other cultures and other contexts, but not at the cost of what our culture and our context requires. So of course there are solutions in every cultural context, and some of them have done very well, and we have to bear in mind that ours is a country that is very unique in terms of the kind of diversity it has, the kind of population diversity, and also the landscapes. I mean, UK and India, you can't compare. And this was very clear during COVID, wasn't it? And when most of the solutions were coming from countries like those, with regard to social distancing, with regard to medicine, with regard to also dissemination of information, that we had to find our own solutions. And our institutions kicked in, to make food, to make, to give out medicines. And I think while there is always opportunities to learn from others, it is also very, very important to reflect on who we are and what we need, and therefore then you look out, okay, what are the other solutions that are around in the world, not at the cost of that. You see, you can't ignore your own self and say, okay, I will follow what somebody else is doing, and then work out what, how it may not work for our context.
Correct. While we talk about the challenges per se, what do you feel are the key challenges in India's urban growth? And while we move towards building sustainable environment for living, what are the hindrances or the barriers that, according to you, are there? Yeah,
so there are all these alarming statistics of how, in the next 50 years, so much of urbanization is, rapid urbanization is what it is called. And one gets a sense that there is this bulldozer of urbanization that is going to swallow up every bit of our landscape. I don't think that is the case, because there are so much diversity of development in India, and I think what institutions in power need to do is how to create diverse ecosystems, so that there is a chance for a forest ecosystem and a desert ecosystem and a rural and a mountainous ecosystem, all these ecosystems to survive. And so there is no need for a blanket urbanization solution. In fact, that will be counterproductive for a country like ours. We need to develop various ecosystems which are rooted in our landscape. So rapid urbanization, whilst it's true, and the counter argument could be that there are a lot of people in rural areas who aspire to live in glass boxes, because it's now aspirational. And I think it is the responsibility of all of us, or people who are privileged to have seen what the drawbacks of that are, and to bring in more awareness, to have a dialogue, to have to just generate more awareness towards an ecosystem that's sustainable for us.
While we talk about this, how do you think is the role of corporations important while we talk about the driving force for sustainable urban practices?
Yeah, I mean, I think the corporate CSR and ECG is now, at a very enlightened state, more than ever it was, and there are very strict parameters of how they're going to spend their money, on what they're going to spend their money, and they closely track their spend and their outcomes, and I think we're doing good, and I think the future looks very bright, and the corporate, the industry is actually, aiming to partner with the government to ensure a more kind of rooted growth, which is unprecedented in this country. So it's looking good.
Right.
The point is, how, will it get sustained, or will it, but I have full faith in our systems, and I do think it will.
Right. So taking in this positivity that you are having in the landscape, what are your views on the new concept of the green buildings and the vertical cities that is coming in, and the learnings from the Middle Eastern states that we should take?
You mean the flood? The floods in Dubai is
no,
also.
No, I actually meant the concept of green buildings and vertical cities. I restrict my.
Yeah, I mean, also that kind of infrastructure has had its own problems, like the recent floods in the Middle East. So I think it's related to your earlier question that this bulldozing urbanization that is going to swallow up all our diversity need not happen. And so vertical cities is not just the only solution; it is one of the solutions. But you have also got, and we're going to talk about Jaipur and other cities, that Shahjahanabad, for example, which have been very dense. And so the kind of population, the kind of diversity, density those cities hold, which automatically then, give a good neighborhood watch solution. There is more community living, there is more sort of exchange, collaboration in terms of roles in a city. So we also need to look at those forgotten models and see whether we can revive those. And in Europe, many of these cities have been revived, and even in London, you can be living in a 200-year-old house and have a modern living. So these are not opposites. We have to learn from the historic solutions we have, and how to modernize it and how to upgrade it for our contemporary needs.
Right. While we talk about evaluation of buildings and the intersection that we see these days with ESG ratings, what are your views on that, and how can we improve? We have been doing quite well, and the intersection has seen a lot of developments. But what are your views, and how do you understand the concept?
So I think we are in a very good situation where we can look at ESG model of evaluation and then leapfrog and maybe include certain things that are not included in that. So how do you kind of make the human role stronger in that? Bring in the people in it, is not just environment and society and governance, and how do you get aspects of environment that are closer to our context? How do you draw those parameters which have to be necessarily different from the parameters that are used in a different context? So I mean, that work will get done. I think we are just starting to do that work. And I think we need to kind of contextualize that to suit us rather than to suit a checklist.
Correct. So coming to the perspective of the roadmap ahead for India, how do you think can urban planners and policymakers, which you already highlighted, and what are the skills that a multidisciplinary student like public policy can have to better understand the sustainable aspect of building cities, and to stay connected with the aligning ourselves with the urban development goals?
Yeah, so I mean, this is again, linked to what we mean by progress and what we mean by urbanization, and what are the parameters by which we judge something as being successful and something as not being successful. And of course, you will agree that the parameter cannot just be economic and statistical. And of course, those parameters are important, but then how do you include other people? And also, it is important, and it is happening, beginning to happen in our country too, that we should ensure that nobody gets left out in this rapid urbanization or rapid growth or rapid progress. And it should be inclusive, of course. And to be inclusive, you have to have diverse solutions. You can't say, one size fits all. I mean, an example, I was recently discussing this with somebody, that, we often say that there are these footpaths we make next to the roads, and these footpaths then get crowded by vendors who encroach the space. Is it the vendors who are encroaching the space, or is it the design of the footpath that's wrong? Let's get our priorities right. These are human beings. Obviously, they will, vendors will sit where there is footfall.
Correct.
And footpath is where the footfall happens. So I think we should sort of re-look at what we call a problem.
Right.
And reframe our priorities. Because, just for the sake of development, we don't have to, just copy solutions that work in another place, and see what we are considering a problem and who are the people we're leaving out. Yeah.
Right. While you mentioned about the problems of these vendors who sit on these footpaths, to highlight and to know your views on how about the people who migrate to cities with the aim to earn more, land up living in not a good condition. How can we include them, and while we keep in mind of planning and building up cities?
Yeah, I mean, I think there has to be, for example, the availability of internet has actually equalized society in a big way. And similarly, there can be, points of employment generation in the rural areas or in areas that are not, like the metros. Education is another thing. I mean, education can actually generate livelihood and generate employment, and actually get rid of the desire to move, because I don't think people actually want to live in squalid conditions. When economic growth and mobility is available where they are, why would they move to another place, leaving their family behind to live in really utterly squalid conditions in order to just make money? So I think also this, with education and awareness, and also having multiple points of growth and development, this would deal with this kind of senseless migration, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
While we talk about migrations, and we see a lot of tier 2 and tier 3 cities who are building up, trying to make pace with the tier 1 cities, what do you think are the learnings that they should take from the already built ones, and the challenges that they might face?
Yeah, and so, the tier 2 cities want to be tier 1, tier 3 wants to be 2, and 2 wants to be 1. And what I think one has to also do is analyze, again, as I said before, what are the problems with tier 1 city, and make it public. And it's not a rosy picture, as we all know who live in tier 1 cities, that there is pollution, there is all sorts of issues I think also popularization of what a good life is. That is important through our films, through our media, through our dialogues. That it is not actually a very fulfilling life when you're living in a polluted, stressful city where you're actually not even getting basic health and nutrition. So I think those kind of things have to be done. I mean, for example, the countryside can be popularized as a good place to live, and living with nature, and this awareness through education, through media, through films, through will happen.
Right.
Yeah, because there is a growing disenchantment with urban living.
True.
So there, I mean, we will all look for solutions.
Right. While we were just discussing before coming here the need of incorporating the architectural side of education in the system, can you just throw some light on that and the need for it in the years and the upcoming ones?
Yeah, and I think architecture, and even a day doesn't pass by when I thank my stars that I'm an architect, because you get to learn so many things. You get to learn about the environment. You get to learn about so many skills. You end up, because through architectural design you imagine spaces, and that's a skill you are taught. But also you have to constantly put yourself in another person's shoes, because you're designing for another person. So it makes you more empathetic. It makes you more sensitive towards what the other person might be thinking, what their needs are. And I think, I've often said that if I had the power to, subject people to one curriculum, I think everybody should have the architectural education, because, you really get a lot of skills, and you end up being a much more sensitive human being.
True.
Yeah.
One last question for urban development or sustainable cities enthusiasts like me, who primarily do not have a background in architectural or engineering, can build up their career in the space and can grow with their interest aligning with the landscape.
Yeah, so I mean, nowadays there are a lot of opportunities at the postgraduate level, at research level, but also you can always collaborate with architects. There has been for some time architects and designers have also have to step down from their ivory towers. I'm saying this for my own profession, that we've been in this ivory towers where we think nobody understands design, or nobody understands architecture, we are the only ones. So I think that is also changing. There is much more collaborative, participatory architectural practices in India now. People working very closely with environment, nature, and communities. So I think it is absolutely important to have multidisciplinary teams.
Right.
So architects should be included, but also there is a need for everybody else.
Right.
So having multidisciplinary teams of planners, of policymakers, of architects, of designers will only lead to more fulfilling, more enriching design.
Right.
Yeah.
With this, if you can just leave our viewers and students with a small message which you think would be important while they grow in their career, would really be helpful.
Well, I would think that it is very important to observe and to think deeply, and I think it is more important to ask the right questions than to know the answers. That's what I think.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you for giving your time. Join in for more such interactive sessions and discussions. Stay tuned for more updates, and thank you for subscribing. Keep watching.